72 hours after they replaced me with the CEO's Gen Z daughter. They lost $6.4 million. And I hadn't even switched to ruthless mode yet. I sat in my Denver apartment, watching the financial news ticker scroll across my screen. Valeris Holdings stock plummeted in real time. My phone buzzed with desperate texts from former colleagues, but I didn't answer. They made their choice that Monday morning when they handed my life's work to a 24-year-old whose greatest achievement was going viral on TikTok. Now they were learning what happens when you underestimate the woman who built the system. My name is Alyssa Hartman, and for 11 years, I was the invisible shield protecting Valeris Holdings from financial catastrophe. At 38, I'd built their entire risk management infrastructure from scratch, creating systems that saved them from market volatility that would have buried lesser firms. I wasn't just good at my job, I was the job. That Monday morning started like any other. I arrived at our glass tower in downtown Denver at 6:30 a.m., coffee in hand, ready to review the Asian market closings. The elevator ride to the 47th floor was familiar, comforting even. I'd made this journey thousands of times, each trip reinforcing my place in this corporate ecosystem. The executive conference room was already buzzing when I entered. Greg Whitmore, our CEO, stood at the head of the mahogany table, his usual smugness amplified by something I couldn't quite place. Beside him stood a young woman in a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She couldn't have been older than 25, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having faced real adversity. "Alyssa, perfect timing," Greg said, his voice carrying that false warmth I'd learned to distrust. "I'd like you to meet Luna Whitmore, our new Chief Innovation Officer." Whitmore, of course. "She'll be taking over strategic financial operations, effective immediately," he continued, not meeting my eyes. "We feel it's time for fresh perspectives, new energy, you understand." The room went silent. 11 years of 80-hour weeks, of building Sentinel Core, our proprietary risk assessment system, from nothing. Of saving Greg's ass more times than I could count, reduced to a Monday morning ambush. "And my position?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "We're transitioning you to a consulting role. Same pay, of course. We value your institutional knowledge." Translation: "We're putting you in a corner office to rot while my daughter plays with the company I helped build." Luna stepped forward, extending a manicured hand. "I'm so excited to learn from you, Alyssa. Dad's told me so much about your traditional methods. I can't wait to bring some disruption to this space." Traditional methods. The same methods that had navigated us through 3 recessions and countless market corrections. I shook her hand, feeling the weakness in her grip, seeing the vacancy behind her Instagram-perfect smile. She had no idea what she was stepping into. More importantly, she had no idea who she was replacing. "When do I transition?" I asked Greg. "Immediately." Luna's eager to dive in. I nodded once, gathered my laptop, and walked out without another word. But in my mind, I'd already started counting. 72 hours. That's all I'd need. The elevator ride down from the executive floor felt like descending into a different reality. 23 floors to process what had just happened. 23 floors to transform from Alyssa Hartman, Chief Risk Officer, to Alyssa Hartman, disposable relic of corporate America. Back in my soon-to-be former office, I stared at the wall of achievements that suddenly meant nothing. Industry awards, letters of commendation, photos with clients whose portfolios I'd saved from disaster. All worthless now that Greg's daughter needed a playground. I pulled up my LinkedIn on instinct, then closed it immediately. No. This wasn't about finding another job. This was about something much more satisfying. My phone buzzed. A notification from TikTok. I'd downloaded it months ago to understand market trends among younger investors. Luna Whitmore had just posted a video. From inside our conference room. The caption read, "Day 1 as Chief Innovation Officer. Time to show the boomers and Gen Xers how it's done." Girl boss. Financial disruption. New generation. In the video, she spun in her chair, designer heels clicking against the floor I'd walked for over a decade. Ladies, it's time we talk about why middle-aged women in finance need to learn when to step aside for fresh perspectives. No offense to the previous generation, but spreadsheets are so last decade. Middle-aged, I was 38. The comments were already flooding in from her million followers, praising her for keeping it real and disrupting the old boys club. If only they knew she was the ultimate product of that same club, handed a C-suite position by daddy while women like me built our careers one algorithm at a time. I thought back to 2013, my first year at Valeris, fresh from MIT with a master's in computational finance. I'd walked into a firm hemorrhaging money from poorly assessed derivatives. Greg had been desperate then, his swagger replaced by panic as investor lawsuits piled up. "Fix this," he'd said, sliding a box of financial records across his desk. "I don't care how." 6 months later, I'd created Sentinel Core, not just a risk management system, a predictive AI that could analyze market patterns, flag dangerous positions, and prevent the kind of losses that killed financial firms. It was my baby, built during countless nights when Luna was probably still in high school, perfecting her selfie angles. The system had saved Valeris over $200 million and prevented losses over the years. I'd refined it, upgraded it, made it so integral to our operations that removing it would be like performing brain surgery with a chainsaw. But here's what Greg never understood, because he never bothered to read the fine print. I'd developed Sentinel Core's first iteration as an independent contractor. The base code, the fundamental architecture, it was mine. I'd been smart enough to register the preliminary patents before signing my full-time contract. Valeris had the right to use it, modify it, build upon it. But the core? The foundation everything else rested on? That belonged to Alyssa Hartman. My phone rang. Marcus from IT. One of the few people who understood how critical Sentinel Core was to daily operations. "Alyssa, what the hell? I just got word about the transition. Luna's already in here asking how to make the computers more intuitive. She wants to replace our risk algorithms with something called vibe-based trading. I can't." "Marcus," I interrupted. "Document everything, every request, every change she wants to make. Email me copies of everything." "You're not seriously leaving us with her?" "I'm transitioning to a consulting role," I said, tasting the bitterness of the words. "But don't worry. She's eager to bring disruption to the space." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began my real work. First, a comprehensive backup of every system I'd built, every protocol I'd established. Legal? Absolutely. I'd negotiated data access into my contract years ago. Another detail Greg had waved through without reading. Then I drafted an email to legal, professionally inquiring about the intellectual property status of Sentinel Core's foundational architecture, just crossing T's and dotting I's, of course, making sure everyone understood their obligations during this transition. By the time I left the building that evening, carrying a single box of personal items, I'd laid the groundwork. Luna Whitmore wanted to disrupt. She was about to learn that some systems aren't meant to be disrupted, they're meant to be respected. And when you don't respect them, they have a way of disrupting you right back. That night, I transformed my home office into a war room. Every contract I'd signed, every email thread about intellectual property, every technical document, I arranged them with the precision of a general planning a siege. The difference was, I wasn't attacking, I was simply preparing to let them destroy themselves. The legal department responded to my inquiry within hours, probably hoping to placate me quickly and avoid any complications. Their response was a masterpiece of corporate incompetence. "Dear Ms. Hartman, thank you for your inquiry. We can confirm that all work products developed during your employment belong to Valeris Holdings." All work products during employment, the key phrase that would cost them everything. I pulled up the original Sentinel Core documentation, dated March 2013, 2 months before my official employment began. Back then, I'd been consulting, paid per project, while Greg decided if he wanted to bring me on full-time. The timestamp on the patent filing was beautiful in its clarity. March 15, 2013, 3:47 a.m. My name, my address, my creation. The foundation code, the revolutionary algorithm that made everything else possible, it was mine. Valeris had built upon it, integrated it, become dependent on it, but they'd never owned the heart of it. I crafted my response carefully, attaching the patent documentation and my original consulting agreement. Thank you for the clarification. I'm attaching documentation showing Sentinel Core's foundational architecture was developed prior to my employment. I trust this won't affect our transition arrangements. Let legal panic about that for a while. My phone buzzed with updates from Marcus and other allies still inside Valeris. Luna had called an all-hands meeting for the financial division, announcing her revolutionary changes. She'd hired a team of innovation consultants, kids fresh from college who specialized in disrupting traditional finance through social media integration. One message from Sarah in compliance made me smile grimly. She just asked why we can't use AI to predict the vibe of the market. I think I'm having a stroke. But the real gift came from Tom in engineering. He'd forwarded me Luna's first official memo about updating Sentinel Core. She wanted to integrate it with a trending AI platform that promised to democratize financial prediction through crowdsourced sentiment analysis. Translation: she wanted to let Twitter decide our investment strategies. I knew exactly what would happen. Sentinel Core wasn't just software, it was a carefully calibrated ecosystem. Every component talked to every other component in a specific way. Change one element without understanding the whole, and you'd create cascading errors that would take weeks to fix, if you even knew how to fix them. I opened my backup of the system architecture and studied it like a chess master reviewing famous games. Every vulnerability, every dependency, every place where Luna's ignorance could cause catastrophic failure, I mapped them all. Then I did something that would seem counterintuitive to anyone who didn't understand the long game. I sent Luna an email. Luna, congratulations on your new role. I've compiled some documentation on Sentinel Core that might be helpful as you implement your vision. Please find attached the system overview and integration guidelines. Best of luck with the innovations, Alyssa. The documentation I sent was completely accurate, thorough, even, but it was also written at a level that assumed significant technical knowledge. Every warning was there, every potential pitfall clearly marked. When things went wrong, and they would, no one could say I hadn't provided proper documentation. I also included one special gift, a note about the monthly maintenance protocol. Critical. System requires manual cache clearing and algorithm recalibration every 30 days. Failure to complete this process may result in compound calculation errors. See Appendix J for detailed instructions. Appendix J was 40 pages of dense technical specifications. Luna would never read it. More importantly, she'd never admit she didn't understand it. The final piece of my preparation was the most satisfying. I drafted a formal notice to Valeris, professionally informing them that I would be exercising my right to terminate technical support for any pre-employment intellectual property after a 72-hour transition period. Standard procedure, completely legal. Devastating. I scheduled the email to send in 24 hours, giving them time to get comfortable with their new arrangement first. As I leaned back in my chair, I thought about all the times I'd saved Greg's reputation. The overnight sessions debugging critical errors, the presentations where I'd made him look like a visionary instead of the lucky fool he was. The sexual harassment complaint from 2019 that I'd helped make disappear because the company couldn't afford the scandal. Well, they were about to discover what they really couldn't afford. 72 hours. That's all I needed to show them the price of replacing expertise with nepotism. The countdown had begun, and Alyssa Hartman was about to teach Valeris Holdings the most expensive lesson of their corporate lives. The first 24 hours passed exactly as I'd predicted. My formal notice about terminating technical support landed in Greg's inbox at 9 a.m. Tuesday, precisely when he'd be in his weekly board meeting. By the time he read it, Sentinel Core had already started its subtle descent into chaos. Marcus texted me at 11:47 a.m. Luna tried to optimize the risk parameters, change the volatility thresholds because they seemed too conservative. Systems throwing warnings she's ignoring. I sipped my coffee from my apartment balcony, watching Denver's financial district gleam in the morning sun. Somewhere in that glass tower, my replacement was about to learn why you don't perform surgery with YouTube tutorials. By hour 30, the first cracks appeared. Sarah from compliance forwarded me an internal alert. Unusual trading pattern detected in emerging markets portfolio. 1.2 Motors position opened without standard risk assessment. The beauty of Sentinel Core's design was its interconnectedness. Luna had adjusted one parameter, thinking it was isolated, but that parameter fed into 17 other calculations, which influenced 23 more processes. Like dominoes arranged by someone who understood physics versus someone who just thought they looked pretty. Hour 36 brought panic. Tom in engineering called me directly, whispering, "She's trying to integrate that AI platform. Overrode the compatibility warnings. The system's rejecting it. But she keeps forcing the install. It's like watching someone try to perform a heart transplant with a butter knife." "Did she read Appendix J about the monthly maintenance?" I asked innocently. "Are you kidding? She had an intern summarize it in bullet points. The intern doesn't understand it either." I pulled up my laptop and watched Valeris's internal systems through the diagnostic portal I still had access to, another oversight in their rush to revolutionize. The maintenance deadline was approaching, and Luna had no idea it existed. Hour 42. The AI platform integration finally broke through Sentinel Core's defenses. Like introducing an invasive species to a delicate ecosystem, it began corrupting data streams, misreading market signals, and most critically, it disrupted the algorithm that calculated position sizes for automated trades. Marcus sent a screenshot. "Holy shit, Alyssa. It's recommending a 3.2 Mammals position in some blockchain startup called Crypto Nova. The fundamentals are non-existent. It's basically a Ponzi scheme with better marketing." But here's what made it perfect. The recommendation came with all the right buzzwords. Disruptive technology. Innovative blockchain solution. Gen Z market penetration. Everything Luna believed in, wrapped in a package that Sentinel Core, in its corrupted state, couldn't properly analyze. Hour 48. Luna approved the trade. I knew the exact moment it happened because Tom called, panic in his voice. She overrode 4 safety protocols to push it through, said the system was being too conservative, that we needed to embrace risk to stay competitive. The old Sentinel Core would have screamed warnings, forced additional approvals, maybe even locked the trade entirely. But the corrupted version, confused by conflicting parameters and AI interference, simply processed it as requested. Hour 54. The maintenance window passed. Uncleared cache data began compounding calculation errors. Small at first, a few thousand here, a rounding error there. But in financial systems, small errors don't stay small. They multiply, spread, infect everything they touch. Hour 60 brought the avalanche. The Bloomberg terminal data I monitored from home showed Valeris's positions shifting wildly. The corrupted algorithms were now making automated trades based on false data, each transaction building on the errors of the last. Marcus. She's in full panic mode. Brought in her innovation team to fix it. They're making it worse. One of them just suggested turning it off and on again. By hour 66, the $3.2 million Crypto Nova position had collapsed. The blockchain startup, investigated by the SEC for fraud that morning, saw its value evaporate. But that was just the appetizer. The real devastation came from the futures contracts. Sentinel Core's corrupted state had miscalculated hedging positions, leaving Valeris exposed to currency fluctuations they thought they were protected against. When the Asian markets opened with unexpected volatility, every miscalculation compounded. Hour 71. I received a call from Greg. I let it go to voicemail. "Alyssa, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding about the technical support. Call me immediately." Hour 72. The final tally appeared on my screen. Between the Crypto Nova collapse, the futures miscalculations, and the cascade of automated trading errors, Valeris Holdings had lost $6.4 million. My phone rang again. "Greg." This time, I answered. Alyssa, please. We need you back. The system. It's not functioning properly. I'm aware, I said calmly. I believe Luna is implementing her innovative disruption strategy. This isn't a joke. We've lost millions. Then I suggest you contact technical support. Oh, wait, you terminated that arrangement 72 hours ago. The silence on the other end was beautiful. Finally, Greg spoke, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. What do you want? I smiled, looking out at the city where I'd spent 11 years building something they'd destroyed in 3 days. Time for the killing blow. What do I want? I repeated Greg's question, savoring each word like aged wine. I want nothing from you. Greg, our business relationship ended 72 hours ago when you replaced me with your daughter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with my intellectual property attorney. Alyssa, wait. I hung up and immediately texted him a single line. You replaced me with your daughter. Now replace $6.4 million. The beauty of preparation is that when the moment comes, you don't have to scramble. Everything was already in motion. My attorney, Jennifer Walsh, had filed the copyright claim for Sentinel Core's foundational architecture that morning. The documentation was ironclad, timestamps, patent filings, the original consulting agreement, all predating my employment by months. Within an hour, Valaris received the formal cease and desist notice. They had 2 options: stop using any systems built on my intellectual property or negotiate a licensing agreement. Given that Sentinel Core was integrated into every aspect of their operations, the first option meant corporate suicide. My phone became a lightning storm of notifications. Board members, former colleagues, even reporters who'd caught wind of the massive loss. I ignored them all except one, a message from Robert Sterling, CEO of Corsair Equity, Valaris's biggest competitor. Ms. Hartman, I've been following your situation with great interest. We should talk. I'd been expecting his call. Robert was too smart not to recognize an opportunity when it hemorrhaged $6.4 million in front of him. We met that afternoon at his office, a sleek space that managed to convey power without Greg's ostentatious displays. Robert didn't waste time with small talk. I'll cut to the chase, he said. We want you and we want Sentinel Core. Name your terms. Chief Operating Officer, I said without hesitation. Full autonomy over risk management, a team of my choosing, and a licensing agreement for my intellectual property that ensures I maintain ownership. Done. I'm not finished. I also want a public announcement. Make it clear that Corsair is acquiring not just my expertise, but the technology I created. I want the market to understand exactly what Valaris lost. Robert smiled. You want to twist the knife. I want to establish value, I corrected. When you destroy something worthwhile through arrogance and nepotism, there should be consequences. While we negotiated the finer points, my phone buzzed with increasingly desperate messages from Valaris. The board had called an emergency meeting. Trading had been suspended, pending investigation. Luna's TikTok account had gone mysteriously silent. By evening, Jennifer had forwarded me Valaris's pathetic counteroffer. They wanted to hire me back as CRO, my old position, with a 20% raise and a promise that Luna would work under my mentorship. I forwarded the offer to Robert with a single comment. They still don't get it. The next morning, Corsair's announcement hit the financial news like a tsunami. Corsair Equity acquires legendary risk management technology, appoints Alyssa Hartman as COO. The press release was a masterpiece of corporate warfare. It detailed my creation of Sentinel Core, its revolutionary impact on risk management, and how Corsair would be implementing Sentinel Core 2.0, an enhanced version I'd been developing in my spare time. The market reacted immediately. Corsair's stock jumped 7%, Valaris dropped 12%, but the true checkmate came in the afternoon. Greg had called an all-hands meeting, attempting damage control. Someone live-streamed it, probably Marcus, bless him, and I watched from my new office at Corsair. Greg stood at the podium, his usual confidence shattered. I want to address the recent changes and challenges, Sometimes in our pursuit of innovation, we make decisions that don't yield the expected results. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A board member stood up, Patricia Chen, who'd always been the smartest one in that room. Greg, let me be direct. Your decision to replace our most valuable technical asset with your unqualified daughter has cost us millions in direct losses and billions in market value. The board has lost confidence in your leadership. The stream cut off, but I didn't need to see more. Jennifer called an hour later. Valaris wants to settle. They're offering $10 million for a perpetual license to continue using their current version of Sentinel Core. No updates, no support, just the right to keep their existing systems running. Counter with $15 million, I said. They'll pay it. They have no choice. She was right. They paid. That evening, as I stood in my new office overlooking Denver's skyline, I thought about Luna's TikTok video. Middle-aged women need to step aside? No, dear. We need to step up. And when you try to push us down, we don't just survive. We thrive. The morning I walked out of Valaris Holdings for the last time, the building felt different, not smaller, just irrelevant. The security guard who'd cheerfully greeted me for 11 years now avoided eye contact. The executives waiting for the elevator suddenly found their phones fascinating. Even the marble walls seemed to lean away, as if the building itself knew I no longer belonged to it. I belonged to something bigger now. In the lobby, a small crowd of junior analysts and IT staff had gathered. These were the people who understood what had really happened, who knew the difference between innovation and destruction. Marcus stood at the front, and as I passed, he started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not a celebration. A farewell salute to the captain who'd kept their ship afloat for over a decade. I nodded once, acknowledging what we all knew. They were still on that sinking ship, and I couldn't save them anymore. The walk to my car was interrupted by Sandra Keating from Financial Weekly. She'd been covering Valaris for years and knew exactly what this story meant. Ms. Hartman, any comment on the leadership changes at Valaris? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Valaris Holdings is discovering what many companies learned too late, that sustainable innovation requires both vision and foundation. I wish them luck in finding their balance. And the $6. $4 million loss. You should ask their Chief Innovation Officer. I'm sure she has some disruptive insights. The article would run with the headline, The $6.4 million Lesson, When Nepotism Meets Technical Debt. Sandra always did have a gift for titles. My first week at Corsair felt like stepping from a crumbling museum into a functioning laboratory. Robert Sterling hadn't built his empire on ego. He'd built it on recognizing value and protecting it. My new team was handpicked, experienced professionals who understood that innovation meant evolution, not destruction. During my first all-hands presentation, I laid out the vision for Sentinel Core 2.0. The original had been reactive, analyzing risk after positions were suggested. The new version would be predictive, identifying opportunities while simultaneously calculating their true cost. We're not just managing risk, I told the packed conference room. We're going to weaponize prudence. The development process was everything Valaris had never been. No influencer consultants, no viral marketing strategies, no attempts to make financial analysis fun for social media. Just serious professionals doing serious work, backed by leadership that understood the difference between patient capital and patient stupidity. 3 weeks into my tenure, the news broke. Greg Whitmore had resigned as CEO of Valaris Holdings, accepting full responsibility for the strategic missteps that cost shareholders millions. Luna's position as Chief Innovation Officer had been quietly eliminated, though the press release thanked her for her fresh perspectives during a transitional period. I didn't gloat. There was too much work to do. But I did allow myself one moment of satisfaction when the Wall Street Journal ran its analysis of the Valaris collapse. They'd interviewed Luna, who blamed the failure on outdated systems that couldn't handle modern innovation. The reporter, clearly having done their homework, followed up with a simple question. But wasn't the system created by Alyssa Hartman, who's now implementing an advanced version at your father's primary competitor? The article noted that Ms. Whitmore declined to answer further questions. 6 months later, Corsair's implementation of Sentinel Core 2.0 had prevented losses estimated at $400 million while identifying profitable positions that yielded 18% returns. We were featured on the cover of Fortune with the headline, "The Revenge of Expertise." Robert called me into his office after the magazine hit stands. "They're calling you the $6.4 million woman," he said, gesturing to the article. The exact amount Valaris lost became the symbol of what happens when companies value connections over competence. "It's not about revenge," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "It's about proving that experience, genuine innovation, and technical excellence aren't things you can replace with nepotism and TikTok strategies." Speaking of which, Robert slid a tablet across his desk. "Thought you might enjoy this." Luna Whitmore had pivoted to becoming a failure coach, selling courses on how to bounce back from public corporate disasters. Her latest video, "Why Traditional Systems Failed Me," had gone viral for all the wrong reasons when commenters noticed she still didn't seem to understand what had actually happened. I pushed the tablet back. "She's irrelevant now." And she was. Because while she was building her brand on failure, I was building systems that would define financial risk management for the next decade. The best revenge isn't just success, it's sustained excellence that makes your enemy's failures look even worse by comparison. As I left Robert's office, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Greg Whitmore had viewed my profile. For the third time this week, I smiled and kept walking. Some ghosts are worth keeping around, if only to remind them what they lost. They underestimated the woman who built the system. That's the last time they'll ever do that. The podium at the Global Financial Innovation Summit felt like destiny. 1 year after leaving Valaris in ruins, I stood before an audience of 500 industry leaders, ready to deliver my keynote on protecting wealth in the age of disruption. The irony wasn't lost on me, or them. True innovation, I began, clicking to my first slide, a graph showing Corsair's growth trajectory versus Valaris's decline. Isn't about destroying what works, it's about understanding why it works, then making it better. In the front row, Patricia Chen, formerly of Valaris's board and now one of Corsair's newest board members, nodded approvingly. She'd jumped ship 6 months ago, bringing with her intimate knowledge of just how badly Greg's leadership had poisoned the well. "Let me tell you about a $6.4 million lesson," I continued, and the audience leaned in. They all knew the story, but they wanted to hear it from me. When companies prioritize nepotism over knowledge, when they mistake youth for innovation, when they believe that expertise can be replaced by enthusiasm, they don't just lose money, they lose their future. The presentation detailed Sentinel Core 2.0's achievements. In 1 year, we'd not only revolutionized Corsair's risk management, but licensed the technology to 7 other firms. Each licensing deal was worth more than my entire annual salary at Valaris had ever been. "The market has a way of correcting hubris," I said, clicking to my final slide. "Sometimes that correction costs $6.4 million, sometimes it costs everything." The applause was thunderous. As I left the stage, my assistant handed me my phone. 17 messages, but only one caught my eye. "Marcus, my old ally from Valaris. Watching your keynote from my new office. Thanks for showing me it was okay to jump from a sinking ship. Your newest Corsair team member." The post-conference reception was a blur of congratulations and business cards. Everyone wanted to know the real story, the details I hadn't shared on stage. I gave them just enough to satisfy curiosity while maintaining the professional high ground. The full truth, the rage, the meticulous planning, the satisfaction of watching them burn, that was mine alone. Near the end of the evening, someone approached from behind. I knew who it was before turning around. Some failures carry a distinctive scent. Alyssa. Greg Whitmore looked like he'd aged a decade in 1 year. His trademark confidence had been replaced by something hollow, desperate. "Greg." I wanted to apologize. "What happened at Valaris? The decisions I made were exactly what you wanted to make, I interrupted smoothly. You chose nepotism over merit. The market responded accordingly. Luna's doing well, he said, as if I'd asked. She's pivoting to wellness coaching now, says finance was too toxic. I almost laughed. Finance wasn't toxic. Incompetence was. I'm glad she found her calling, I said, turning to leave. Alyssa, wait. His hand almost touched my arm but stopped, remembering perhaps that he had no right to my attention anymore. We could have built something great together. We did, I replied. Then you gave it to someone who couldn't tell the difference between disruption and destruction. Goodbye. Greg. I left him standing there, a ghost at his own funeral, and walked out into the Denver night. The city sparkled below, full of companies that would thrive or fail based on their choices. Some would choose expertise, others would choose connections. The market would judge them all. My driver was waiting, ready to take me to the airport. Tomorrow. I had meetings in Singapore, 3 firms wanting to license Sentinel Core 2.0. Next week, London. Next month, Tokyo. As we pulled away from the convention center, I sent one final email to my team at Corsair. Remember, we don't just manage risk. We make it expensive for others to ignore. The reply from Robert Sterling came immediately. Worth every penny of the $6.4 million they lost. See you when you're back. We have empires to build. I smiled, closed my laptop, and watched the city fade behind me. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights, Valaris Holdings was struggling to rebuild with outdated systems and wounded pride. Luna Whitmore was probably recording another video about finding yourself after public failure. And Greg was learning what every king discovers when they mistake their throne for their power. Kingdoms built on nepotism crumble at the first real test. They underestimated the woman who built the system. That's the last time they'll ever do that. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate revenge, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Alyssa's position? Let me know in the comments.